Okay guys, my name is Bryce Crispin and this is the build tutorial video of the 3D printed Groza kit and the HPA engine installation and all that stuff you need to know how to put this whole Groza together. So when you first get your gun, it's obviously going to come in the box. I've already built this gun, so there's going to be a couple of minor differences in terms of what's already been done and what hasn't. But it's going to look generally like this. So take your mag out, use that later, whatever you want. All we need is the gun. You put this box aside, the gun out. There you go. So we're going to start with the disassembly of the original AKS-74U. So we're going to start with completely disassembling the base gun. So I lost the grip screw for this, but we're going to start by removing the grip screw, which in turn you remove your pistol grip. Set that aside, we will use that for later. Next is going to be one of the modification components. So this is the trigger guard. This normally sits like this. This is not there on the real steel version, so you will have to kind of bend and work that off and then grind it a little bit smooth. You can barely notice it's been done on mine. Just be careful if you're using anything to cut it, anything like that. Just make sure it's as smooth and as streamlined as possible just so you can't notice. But this is going to have to be removed and broken off. Next step, you're going to open up your dust cover. You're going to remove your charger handle and spring assembly, like so. Set that aside, but we'll use that for later. Next, we can move on to removing the front assembly. Not many tools needed to do this, so there's going to be 4 screws right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to remove all 4 of those to take the entire front of the receiver and barrel assembly apart. With that, this entire front assembly slides off. We're going to set this to the side. We're going to have to disassemble some more stuff later. Onto this, we're going to start by removing the gearbox. We're going to have to carefully pop that up. Careful not to lose that. And then we're going to unscrew this selector. Remove all these components. Make sure you save these for later. So once we have the front barrel assembly removed, and we remove the selector lever, all those components, we should be able to just slide the gearbox up and out. You're going to want to save these components as well. Set these aside and set the gearbox aside as well. Next, we're going to want to take the stock assembly off. So this is another kind of dangerous part to where you don't want to slip, but we are going to tap out the original set pin in here for the stock to rotate on. So we are going to remove that. It's a little finicky. That removes like so. And then we can remove the folding stock. This will not be needed at all. On the real steel Groza, this sight mount rail is not on the actual real steel one. So we're going to go ahead and remove that. On this version of the AK, it's just an Allen key. So if you have an Allen key set, you can remove this sight mount. It's one of the reasons why I chose this brand and model of AK, to be as accurate to the real steel as possible. And so it's not riveted into the actual receiver. We only have one more step for component removing for this receiver. So in here you can see that there's the stock locking latch for when the stock is folded. We are going to remove this, as it is not present on the real steel as well. And we need the spring for another component later for this build. So make sure not to lose the spring. So take a little bit of finessing. up, out. Then save this spring for your trigger assembly later. So one mistake I made when I was removing this flash hider, which is next, is that there's actually a set pin below the secondary threading here. So you're actually going to want to heat this up as hot as you can get it, remove the outside actual flash hider with the glue and stuff like that, and then you're going to want to drill out that pin, because this is what happens, is that you end up stripping partially some of the threads, which you will need for future components. So that's one mistake on my end, as this is the first time I do it. But you're going to want to remove the flash hider, and then once you get everything heated up, an easy way is just to stick a screwdriver through these two holes and twist it off. That is very much a pain in the butt. However, once you get that off, you can save your threads. Next is going to be the gas block and front side assembly. So there's a Phillips head screw here, right here. You're going to take out. Make sure you do not lose the screws. You're going to use it later. And we do have one more pin. Rear the gas block here. A lot of times you just push that out. Sometimes it's a little difficult. But that comes out like so. Now, to remove the front gas block and side assembly, this will not be used. To remove the upper handguard, this will be used for later. Next is going to be the lower handguard. So all you need to do, there's a lever right here. You're going to pop this up and over. That releases this front retaining clip, and this comes out. And this can just slide forward, like so. Then you have your spring to hold the handguard in place and the actual wood handguard itself. Now be careful not to lose, you don't need to remove it, but be careful not to lose. It falls out easily is that there's a pin right here that goes on the actual outer barrel and the top of this receiver area that you don't want to lose, so make sure you retain that. Cut. So this is pretty much the final gearbox you're going to end up with once you're done. I'm going to go over how to modify this gearbox in order for it to work with this system, and we'll go into depth on how to build this gearbox as well. But this is what the final product is going to look like. So this is a standard version 3 gearbox. I did not use the original because I had an extra shell on hand, but if you don't, you are going to have to remove all the original components in the original gearbox that it came with, and reuse some and discard others. Pretty much, I have the original right here, the original gearbox. As you can see, there's obviously no motor, and the bottom of this gearbox has been cut down right along here. So if you look right along here, pretty much goes in line with the base right here, and then I cut right along this area on both halves of the gearbox. Make sure to maintain this selector system right here, that selector bar, so it doesn't just pop out and fall out. So make sure you maintain enough material. I actually cut mine a little too close to it, but it still functions. Just maintain enough material to make sure that this system still functions correctly. But this is crucial to be able to get some of the other parts to fit, and also make the gun realistic in terms of what it looks like on the outside. So next I'm gonna disassemble this and go over the reassembly and what's needed. So once you have pretty much a completely stripped gearbox, we're gonna start with the left side of the gearbox shell. Once you've already modified it, once you've taken everything apart, once you get it all stripped is when you're gonna want to drum these parts off right along here. You can see, kind of see where I start, right about here. Just go along that line that this provides. Just make sure you maintain over, probably around 60 to 70% of that hole, so it still has the ability to retain the selector there. But we're going to start by installing the cutoff lever. So this is actually modified. This back end was actually cut so it doesn't stick out past the gearbox shell as well, like so, as it rotates. doesn't stick out, so it doesn't block some other stuff. You don't need this actual cutoff lever part, as it's not actuated by any gears or anything like that. All this is the select fire for the trigger board. So we're going to start by pushing the selector plate forward, backward, depending. There. So that slots in, and this goes down, and then we can, wherever my screwdriver is, then we can install this with this screw that I came with. Screw that in. That moves freely. You can install the spring. This, we're going to want this all the way back. Put the spring in right here. Bring it in. Make sure we don't lose any of those parts. Especially the spring. These springs have a tendency to fly off into random locations if you're not careful. Come on. Like that. Let's try again. It can be a little difficult sometimes. You just gotta get the right angle on it. There we go. So you got it. So now when you push the selector bar back, it engages the cutoff lever like so. You no longer need any of this original electronic trigger assembly or any of the cylinder, or pretty much anything else, and the spring guide, anything. We're going to start by installing the trigger unit. So this one's been modified. This one was already broken, so this is where the trigger is, and then this is the selector micro switch right here. This one was already damaged, so I did have to solder to a couple different points to get it to work, but normally there's going to be a little button micro switch here. You're going to solder to this point right here and to this point right here. You don't even have to take the original micro switch off. You should just be able to solder to those two solder points right there, and then directly run these trigger wires directly to your micro switch that's in the front of your lower handguard assembly where your trigger is. Each kit comes with a micro switch, like so. When you do solder these, you're going to want to solder it so, for one, that both wires kind of go up and away from this area, and you're going to want to solder one to the ground and to the normal open, not the normal closed. So you always want it when it's open, normal open, closed, normal open, closed. You're going to want to solder to the ground and the normal open. Normal open is signified by NO, and the ground is signified by a C. So once you have these two wires soldered to these 2 points here, we're going to place the electronic trigger assembly for the HPA engine. We're going to run the wires through where the original trigger wires ran through, like so. Sometimes all this stuff can be a little finicky. Then we're going to place that using the original trigger assembly screw. Very carefully slide this in. Like so. Go ahead and screw that into place. So now that we have the trigger unit installed, we can go ahead and place our HP engine in here. So when you do install an HP engine, you're going to make sure all your O-rings are lubed up. This has a version 3 nozzle. Make sure you have the correct nozzle for this. Install that, it just sets in like so. We're going to take our wiring harness and feed it through the back, through this original hole that you fed the other wires through previously. And we're going to connect this connector right here. So we're going to start. This one's going to be a little finicky. Line it up. Push it in, it clips in. And this you can kind of feed under. Want to kind of help retain it. It attaches like so. So now we're pretty much ready to fully assemble this. You're going to want to take your other half of your gearbox shell like so. Fits in like that. I'm going to take our other components here. Screw these guys in. Okay, I'm going to rotate it, take the other part of your version 3 selector, place that flat in so it lines up like so with your selector plate. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to install the other selector gear. Make sure everything's tight. If you want to, you can Loctite these screws, but since it's not an AEG, there's not a lot of vibrations going through everything, so it should be fine. And make sure everything works. It engages smoothly. It's not catching on anything. Everything stays in. All the wires come out fine and are routed correctly. So this is your completed gearbox assembly. Alright, next you want to grab your receiver assembly and your front barrel assembly here. We're going to start installing the gearbox into the actual receiver shell. You're going to start by installing this trigger piece. This doesn't really do anything mechanical besides support the actual selector part of it. So we're not actually engaging the safety. This is one thing with the kit, is that there's no more mechanical safety as there's no more mechanical trigger. So that's one thing you do lose, but it's a small sacrifice to have this kit. And then we're going to make sure we line up all these gears correctly. This last tooth, like so. So we have the full range of selection. Now I'm going to take this and route it into the actual receiver, like so. Straight down. Like so. Make sure you don't get any of your cables caught up on the side. I just did. There we go. Okay. Now you're going to take your other selector components right here. You're going to drop the selector block in, aligning it with the grooves that are on that selector lever, and it's internally. Okay, now you have that. You drop this brass sleeve in, line up your selector, then we're going to install a little lock washer and your actual retaining screw. Like so, tighten that down, and then we do have a little aesthetic cover clip here. We're going to clip back on, like so. Next, we'll start with reassembling the front barrel assembly. So this, take that like so. This is the point where you would want to have any barrel or hop-up upgrades and stuff already completed. You're going to reinstall, push in, should clip in like so. Now we're going to rotate that. We're going to reinstall these 4 screws that were on the bottom here. Now that that's installed, we can take our charging handle. We should be able to reclip this back in, like so. And we have, so all this will function. Now we want to route our 2 trigger wires through the front gas block assembly, right through that hole here. Like so. Okay. Now we will be doing the rear butt plate assembly. We're installing the butt stock here, so you're gonna slot it in right there like so. Try to line it up as best you can. You're gonna take the original stock pin, slot it up, make sure the skinny part is facing down. Yes, I have 3 hands. Go ahead. Got that partially in, and then we're gonna go ahead and tap this bad boy in. So all you're gonna do is tap this in. It's like a punch and a little end of a screwdriver or hammer, and we'll come back once that's done. Now that that's done, you want to make sure it moves freely, and that you press the button on the side, in, down, and that it locks. This does. So now you can go ahead, close your dust cover, close this, and your rear is pretty much done. You will need to open it back up to install your FCU and your LiPo battery, but we can go over that later once we're done with assembling the kit. Put it on safe, and then we're going to move on to the front assembly. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. We're going to take our lower handguard here. This is a separate piece that is glued in like so. You slot it in. There's going to be a little slot in the actual lower handguard and a little thing that slides in. You're going to slide it in with some glue on it, super glue, and you're going to glue that in like so, in that exact position. This hole keeps the handguard, the original AEG handguard, from rotating it at all or falling out or anything like that. So it's part of the retaining system. Next, we're going to install our trigger. So if you remember previously, we saved this spring from the locking latch for the stock. You're going to take it like so. There's a slot, and it just clips in and slots in like that, as you can see. Now we're going to start from the bottom like so. So you're going to have your spring and your trigger. Slide it in forward like this. You're going to want to push in and up. You want to take your trigger pin. You're going to line that up like so. Now your trigger should operate. So once we've already soldered to the normal open in the ground position, like so, with the wires facing up, we're going to put some super glue down here on the bottom of this micro switch. We're going to place it in here so that when you pull the trigger down, the micro switch is contacted. I haven't glued it in yet, but just to demonstrate, sometimes it's a little finicky as well. Like so. So when you glue it in, you pull that trigger, it hits that micro switch. And you can kind of adjust a little bit, trigger pull, but just glue it in there and it should be fine. Okay, so next, once you get your micro switch glued in and installed and everything functions correctly, you can hear that click. Everything's soldered in and good to go. We're gonna continue on by installing this piece next. So this is already glued in, but you would take that piece, slot it in like so, at an angle, with the larger blocks facing rearward. You're gonna take your AEG pistol grip. Now, this has been modified slightly to be able to fit this bolt in circumference and depth. So that's something you are going to have to do. You're gonna take your provided bolt in the kit, and slide it in like so. You're gonna have to kind of line it up with this hole that goes through here. And go straight down and in. Gonna rotate it. And this is where you're gonna place your nut, right in this slot. And then you're gonna have to gradually screw that in. Like so. Once you get it started, it should be easier. Tighten down. Probably Loctite this. I haven't had an issue without using Loctite, but if you want to, use some minimum strength blue Loctite. You can see in there, everything's all good to go. The bolt and nut is locked in that slot there. It's super solid. It's not going anywhere. Should be good to go. Now you're going to make sure your wires are on the left side here. You're going to slot it in. The barrel goes through that hole there. Make sure not to lose this pin. Go through like so. You're going to slot in right here. So now your lower handguard is installed like so. You're going to want to take your wires, slot them in just to hide them. Like so. Take a screwdriver or something, press it in between the barrel and the handguard, just to kind of hide them a little bit. I think we'll be able to hide them a little better later as well. So next, we're going to be installing the gas block. That is this component here. You're going to take this with this upper gas block portion facing towards the gun. I'm going to slide in, and it's going to slide right there, like so. You're going to take that Phillips head screw that you removed from that area earlier, and you're going to slot it to the bottom of that hole in the gas block. Screw that in. tighten it down. Now to install the upper handguard, rotate this up. And you need these two pieces, so I'm going to slot this in like that. I'm going to line it up, the groove in here, make sure none of these cables are showing. And there you go. Right, you can close this back up. Work it in, clip it back in. When it's done, now you can install your upper rail, like so. Your push pin goes from the left side, locks this in place. Now we can install trigger guard. Now in this version, I'm gonna have to glue it in. Normally this goes a little bit higher up. I cut mine a little bit short, but you'll be gluing to this block right here and to the inside of this trigger guard right here. So we'll come back once that's done. So these are the last few parts we need to assemble the Groza kit. Pretty much next, once you have your trigger guard glued in, you're going to install this piece right here. So this is the barrel lock. Fortunately, I don't have those parts right now, but you're going to want about a 3.5mm pin and a torsion spring that goes through here that pretty much pushes this part up constantly. And to pretty much unlock the barrel part, you're going to push down against the spring force. But right now we're just going to set that in here because I don't have the spring or pin. But next we are going to install the muzzle device. My threads are a little jacked up, but still threads on right about there, and that will lock in once you have that spring force against it in that pin. Our last and final step is going to be to install the gearbox retaining part and pretty much the cover and fake trigger bar, trigger lock, and all that assembly pretty much. So we're going to take this and feed through this hole, the HPA line. I'm going to rotate it around the bottom of the selector bar there. I'm going to just press fit it in, and that'll lock everything in place. I'm going to reinstall the HPA fitting, like so, and rotate, and we're done. All you have to do is put in your meg, and you're good to go. Here's the final assembly of the OTS-14 Groza.